I never expected a firewood rack to become the most controversial object in Evergreen Heights. But here we are, or rather, here I was, standing in my driveway on a crisp October morning in Boulder, Colorado, staring at a certified letter from the Homeowners Association. My name is Peter Forrester, and I had just built what I considered to be a perfectly reasonable outdoor wood rack against the side of my garage. Nothing fancy, just sturdy 2x4s and some basic construction that kept my winter firewood supply dry and organized. I was proud of it, actually. The thing was solid, functional, and tucked away where it barely affected anyone's view of anything. The letter in my hands told a different story. According to Patricia Henderson, the president of our HOA board, my wood rack was an unauthorized structure that violated Section 7.3 of our community covenant regarding outdoor storage facilities. I had to remove it within 14 days or face daily fines of $50. I read the letter 3 times, convinced I was missing something. A wood rack. They were coming after me for a wood rack that was literally against my own garage, on my own property, holding firewood that I would burn in the fireplace that came standard with every house in this neighborhood. The irony was not lost on me that Patricia herself had been sending out emails all summer about the community's bulk firewood purchase program. She had organized the whole thing, actually encouraged everyone to go in together on a massive order that would be delivered in early November and stored in a shared area near the community center. She had sent at least 15 emails about it, each one more enthusiastic than the last about the money we would all save by ordering together. I had politely declined. I preferred to source my own wood from a local supplier I trusted, a guy named Ron who ran a small operation up in Nederland and sold properly seasoned aspen and pine that burned clean and hot. Plus, I liked having control over my own supply. Call me old-fashioned, but I did not see the appeal of sharing communal firewood and having to coordinate with my neighbors every time I wanted to grab a few logs. That decision, apparently, had not sat well with Patricia. I walked back into my house and tossed the letter on my kitchen counter. My wife Sarah was making coffee and she glanced at my face. "That bad?" she asked. "Patricia Henderson wants me to tear down the wood rack." Sarah turned around, coffee pot in hand. "The one you just built, the one that took you an entire weekend." "That would be the one. On what grounds?" I grabbed the letter and read the relevant section aloud. Any outdoor storage structure not specifically approved by the Architectural Review Committee must be removed, violations subject to daily fines. "A wood rack is not a storage structure," Sarah said. "It is a wood rack." Try telling Patricia that. Sarah poured 2 cups of coffee and slid one across the counter to me. "What are you going to do?" "I am going to the next HOA meeting," I said, "and I am going to ask them to approve it retroactively. The thing is barely visible from the street. It is not an eyesore. It is just firewood." The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening at the community center. I marked it in my calendar and spent the next few days preparing what I thought was a reasonable, rational argument for why my wood rack should be allowed to exist. Tuesday evening arrived cold and clear, with temperatures already dropping into the 30s. I drove the short distance to the community center, a modern building with too much glass and not enough insulation, situated at the center of our planned community. Evergreen Heights was one of those neighborhoods that looked perfect in the developer's brochure's mature trees, winding streets, houses that all looked subtly different despite being built from the same 5 floor plans. It was nice. It was just aggressively managed by people who cared way too much about things that did not matter. Inside the community center, about 20 residents had gathered in the main meeting room. Patricia Henderson sat at the head table flanked by the other board members. Frank Morrison, the treasurer, Linda Chen, the secretary, and Gary Whitmore, the member at large. Patricia was exactly what you would picture when you heard the phrase HOA president mid-50s, short blonde hair cut in that specific soccer mom style, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Peter," she said as I entered, "so glad you could make it. We will get to your issue shortly." I took a seat near the back and waited through 45 minutes of the most boring administrative business imaginable. Discussion of the landscaping budget. A debate about whether the community entrance sign needed repainting. A complaint about someone parking their car on the street overnight. Finally, Patricia cleared her throat and looked directly at me. Item 7 on the agenda, Peter Forrester's unauthorized wood storage structure. I stood up. "I would like to request approval for the wood rack I built. It is a simple structure, well constructed, and it is visible from the Kowalski's house," Patricia interrupted. "They can see it from their kitchen window." "The Kowalskis live 3 houses down and across the street," I said. "And even then, they would have to be specifically looking at the side of my garage to see it." "Nevertheless, it was constructed without approval," Patricia said. "That is a violation of our covenants." "Then I am requesting approval now," I said. "Retroactive approval. The Architectural Review Committee can come look at it. I am happy to make any reasonable modifications." Frank Morrison leaned forward. "The issue, Peter, is that you did not follow the proper process. You were supposed to submit plans before building anything." "It is a wood rack," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "It is not a second-story addition. It is just 2x4s holding firewood." "The covenant does not distinguish between types of structures," Linda Chen said, reading from a document in front of her. "Any modification to the exterior of a property requires prior approval." I took a deep breath. "Okay, fine. I apologize for not following the proper process. Now I am asking for approval. What do I need to do?" Patricia folded her hands on the table. "The board has discussed this, and we have decided to deny your request. The structure needs to come down." "Deny it? You have not even seen it." "We have seen photographs," Patricia said. "Mrs. Kowalski was kind enough to provide them. Of course she was." Margaret Kowalski was Patricia's closest friend in the neighborhood, and the two of them spent half their time walking together in the mornings, no doubt discussing everyone else's business. "Let me get this straight," I said. "You are denying approval for a basic wood rack that stores firewood for the fireplace that came with my house." "That is correct," Patricia said. "We encourage you to participate in the community firewood program instead. We have an excellent shared storage facility that will be stocked in early November. You can keep a small amount of wood on your back patio, but the large rack must be removed. And if I do not remove it, then the fines begin," Patricia said. $50 per day, as outlined in the letter you received." I looked around the room. A few people were studiously avoiding eye contact. Others looked vaguely sympathetic but unwilling to say anything. This was the HOA dance. Everyone complained about the rules in private, but nobody wanted to be the one to publicly challenge the board. "This is ridiculous," I said. "This is the covenant you agreed to when you purchased your home," Patricia said. Her voice had taken on that particular tone of condescension that made my blood pressure spike. "We are all bound by the same rules, Peter. No one gets special treatment." I sat back down, fuming. The meeting continued for another 20 minutes, but I did not hear any of it. I was too busy calculating how much it would cost to fight this versus how much it would cost to just tear down the rack and figure out something else. When the meeting ended, I walked out into the parking lot with my neighbor Tom Richards, who lived 2 doors down from me. That was brutal, Tom said. Patricia really has it out for you. Because I did not join her firewood co-op, probably, Tom said. She was really pushing that thing. I think she got some kind of deal from the supplier and she wants everyone to participate to make the numbers work. So this is about money. With Patricia, it is always about money or control, usually both. Tom unlocked his car. For what it is worth, I think the whole thing is stupid. Your wood rack is fine, but you did not say anything in there. Tom looked uncomfortable. Yeah, well, I have to live here too, you know. Patricia remembers people who cross her. I drove home feeling angry and defeated. Sarah was waiting up, and I told her everything that had happened. So we tear it down, she said. You can stack the wood on the patio like she said. It will not all fit, I said, and it will get wet. The whole point of the rack was to keep everything dry and organized. Then we order less wood, or I could just pay the fines and leave the rack up. Sarah gave me a look. $50 a day adds up fast, Peter. That is $1,500 a month. We cannot afford that just to prove a point. She was right, of course, but something about the whole situation made me irrationally angry. It was not just about the wood rack. It was about Patricia's attitude, the board's arbitrary enforcement of rules. The way they could just decide something was not allowed even when it made perfect sense. I spent that weekend tearing down the wood rack. It took hours to disassemble what I had spent 2 full days building. I stacked as much wood as I could on my covered back patio, but at least half my supply had to be piled up against the back fence, covered with a tarp. It looked messier than the rack had, but apparently that was fine because it was not a structure. November arrived, and with it came the community's bulk firewood delivery. I happened to be home the day the massive truck showed up, loaded with what must have been 10 cords of wood. They dumped it all in a designated area near the community center, just a big pile of mixed hardwood and pine, loosely stacked under a basic metal roof structure. I noticed the structure immediately. It was much larger than my wood rack had been, and it was certainly visible. You could see it clearly from the main road that ran past the community center. But apparently, that was different because it was community property, not personal property. Patricia sent out an email that evening with access instructions. Residents who had participated in the bulk buy could help themselves to wood anytime, but they were expected to log how much they took using an honor system and a clipboard kept in a lock box mounted to a post. I deleted the email and went back to burning my own supply. The first cold snap hit Boulder County in mid-November, earlier than usual. Temperatures dropped into the teens at night, and everyone started running their fireplaces more frequently. I burned through wood faster than I had anticipated, and by early December, I realized I was going to need to order more sooner than expected. I called Ron up in Netherlands, but he had bad news. I am pretty much tapped out for the season, he told me. Demand has been crazy this year. I might have some more in January, but right now I am running on empty. I called 3 other suppliers and got similar answers. The early cold snap had caught everyone off guard, and inventory was low everywhere. The few places that did have wood were charging premium prices, almost double what I usually paid. I was discussing my options with Sarah one evening when my phone buzzed with an email from Patricia. The subject line read, "Important notice regarding community firewood supply." I opened it with a sense of foreboding. The email explained that the community firewood supply was depleting faster than anticipated. Patricia asked that everyone be mindful of their usage and take only what they absolutely needed. She also mentioned that some residents who had not participated in the original bulk buy had been helping themselves to the community supply, and this would no longer be tolerated. Anyone caught taking wood without having paid into the program would face fines. That is interesting, I said to Sarah. What? Their firewood situation. It sounds like they are running low. How low, who knows? But low enough that Patricia is sending out emails about it. The next email came 3 days later. This one was more urgent. Patricia explained that the community supply was nearly exhausted, and they were having difficulty securing more wood at a reasonable price. She had contacted their original supplier, but due to the early cold weather and high demand across the region, replenishment would not be possible until January at the earliest. She ended the email by asking if anyone had personal supplies they would be willing to share with the community, for appropriate compensation, of course. I sat at my kitchen table reading that last line several times. The audacity of it was almost impressive. Patricia had forced me to tear down my wood rack, and now she was asking if I had extra wood to share. "Are you going to respond?" Sarah asked. "I am thinking about it, Peter." "What? I am just thinking." The temperature dropped further. A winter storm moved through the Front Range, dumping 8 inches of snow on Boulder and knocking out power in some areas. Our power stayed on, but our fireplace ran almost constantly, keeping the house warm and our gas bills down. I was loading another log into the fireplace when Sarah's phone rang. She answered, listened for a moment, then held the phone out to me. "It is Patricia Henderson." I took the phone with a sense of grim curiosity. "Hello, Peter, hi, this is Patricia from the HOA." Her voice had lost some of its usual confidence. "I hope you are staying warm in this weather. We are managing. What can I do for you, Patricia?" "Well, I wanted to follow up on my email about firewood. We are in a bit of a difficult situation, and I remembered that you had your own supplier. I was hoping maybe you might have some extra you could share with neighbors who are in need." "I have some," I said carefully, "but I need it for my own fireplace. The winter is just starting." Of course. I was thinking maybe just a small amount. We would pay you naturally." "Whatever you paid, plus a bit extra for your trouble." I looked at my dwindling wood supply on the back patio. I had maybe 2 weeks left at current usage rates, and I still had not found a reliable source for more. "I do not think I can help," I said. "I am running low myself, actually. I tried to order more, but everything is sold out because of the cold weather." There was a pause. "I see. Well, if anything changes, please let us know. We have some elderly residents who are really struggling. Have you tried commercial suppliers in Denver? They might have more inventory." "We have tried everyone," Patricia said, and for the first time she sounded genuinely worried. "The prices are astronomical and most places are sold out anyway." After I hung up, Sarah looked at me with raised eyebrows. "You could have sold her some. We have enough to spare a little." "Do we, though? It is only December. We have 3 more months of winter, maybe 4. You are being petty." "Maybe a little," I admitted. "But she did force me to tear down a perfectly good wood rack. She brought this on herself by organizing this community program without any backup plan." "What about the elderly neighbors she mentioned?" That gave me pause. "If someone really needs help, actually needs it, I would give them wood. But I am not bailing out Patricia's failed community program." Over the next week, the situation deteriorated. Another email from Patricia explained that the community supply was completely exhausted. She had managed to secure a small delivery at an exorbitant price, but it would barely cover a fraction of the need. She was asking residents to consider reducing their fireplace usage and relying more on their furnaces. The irony, of course, was that most people had been using their fireplaces specifically to save money on their gas bills. Natural gas prices had spiked that winter, making fireplaces the more economical option. I was in my driveway shoveling snow when Margaret Kowalski walked past, bundled up in a heavy coat. She was the one who had provided Patricia with photos of my wood rack. I remembered. "Morning, Margaret," I said, keeping my tone neutral. She barely glanced at me. "Morning." "Staying warm as best we can," she said shortly. "Some of us are having more difficulty than others." "Run out of firewood. The community supply is empty," she said. "Thanks for asking." Her tone suggested I was somehow personally responsible for this. "You know, there are suppliers in Denver at 3 times the normal price," Margaret snapped. "Some of us are on fixed incomes, Peter. We cannot just throw money around." She walked off before I could respond. I watched her go, feeling a mixture of frustration and guilt. It was not my fault the community program had failed. But I also did not enjoy watching my neighbors struggle, even the ones who had gotten me in trouble over a wood rack. That evening, I walked over to Tom Richards's house. He answered the door looking stressed. "How are you doing on firewood?" I asked. "Not great," he admitted. "We have maybe a few days left. I joined Patricia's program, which seemed like a good idea at the time. Now I am scrambling to find alternatives." "Have you tried ordering from?" "I have tried everyone," Tom said. "The few places that have inventory are charging crazy prices, and even then, delivery is weeks out because they are so backed up." "What are people doing?" "Some folks are buying those fake logs from the grocery store. They are expensive and do not burn as long, but it is better than nothing. Others are just cranking their thermostats and paying the gas bills. Patricia is still trying to coordinate another bulk buy, but she cannot find suppliers willing to deal with her anymore." "Why not?" Tom lowered his voice. "Between you and me, I heard she shorted the original supplier on payment. There was some dispute about the amount, and she refused to pay the full invoice. Said the quality was not what was promised. He is telling other suppliers not to work with her." I filed that information away. It explained a lot about why Patricia was having such trouble securing more wood. Back at home, I did the math on my own supply. I had about 12 days of wood left if I was conservative with usage. I could stretch it to maybe 2 weeks by running the fireplace only in the evenings and relying on the furnace during the day, but that would defeat the purpose of burning wood in the first place. I spent an hour on the phone trying every supplier I could find within 100 miles of Boulder. The best option I found was a place in Fort Collins that could deliver a half cord in 10 days for twice the normal price. I put in the order, figuring I could limp along until it arrived. The weather did not cooperate. A polar vortex dropped down from Canada, bringing temperatures into the single digits during the day and below zero at night. I burned through my carefully rationed wood supply faster than planned. The fireplace ran constantly, struggling to keep the house warm enough that our pipes would not freeze. I was down to my last 3 days of wood when I came home from work to find Patricia Henderson standing in my driveway. "Peter," she said, "we need to talk." "About what?" "I will be direct. The HOA is in a crisis situation. We have residents who are burning furniture because they do not have firewood. Elderly people who cannot afford to run their furnaces constantly. We need help, and I am asking you." "Asking me what exactly?" "You have firewood. I can see it on your patio from here. You have not participated in the community program, which means you have not depleted your personal supply trying to help your neighbors." I felt my temper rising. "I have not depleted my supply because I planned ahead. I bought my own wood from my own supplier with my own money. And you forced me to tear down the structure I built to properly store it. That was a covenant issue. It was you being petty because I did not join your program," I said. "And now that program has failed and you want me to bail you out." Patricia's face flushed. "There are people suffering, Peter. Actual people who need help. Can you really be this selfish? I am not being selfish. I am taking care of my own family. That is not selfish, that is responsible. You organized a community program without any contingency planning, without doing proper research on supply and demand, and now you are facing the consequences of that. So you will just let your neighbors freeze. Nobody is freezing, I said. They have furnaces. Yes, it is expensive to run them, but that is life. Sometimes things cost money. Easy for you to say. Is it? You forced me to tear down my wood rack. You threatened me with fines. You made it clear that I was not welcome in your community program. And now you show up at my house, demanding I share my resources to fix your failure. Do you see how that might be frustrating from my perspective? Patricia stood there for a moment, visibly struggling to control her anger. The board will remember this, she finally said. I am sure they will. She turned and walked away, her boots crunching in the snow. I went inside feeling angry and guilty in equal measure. Sarah was in the kitchen, and from the look on her face, she had been watching from the window. You could have handled that better, she said, probably. She does have a point about people needing help. And I would help them, individually, if they came and asked. But I am not giving my wood supply to Patricia to redistribute through some HOA program, not after everything that happened. Sarah did not respond, which told me she disagreed but did not want to fight about it. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I kept thinking about Margaret Kowalski and the other elderly residents. I thought about Tom Richards and his family trying to stay warm. Yes, they all had furnaces, and yes, nobody was actually going to freeze. But there was a principle involved here too. They had supported Patricia's enforcement of the covenant rules against me. They had sat silently at that meeting while she denied approval for my wood rack. And now they wanted my help. But then again, maybe that was exactly when people needed help the most, when they had been part of the problem and were now suffering the consequences. I was still wrestling with this ethical dilemma when my phone rang at 6:30 in the morning. It was Tom Richards. Peter, I am sorry to call so early, but we have a situation. What kind of situation? Patricia broke into the shed behind your house last night. She and Frank Morrison, they took your firewood. I was out of bed immediately. What? My security camera caught it. I have it on video. They showed up around 2 in the morning with a truck, loaded up a bunch of your wood, and drove away. I ran downstairs and looked out the back window. The tarp covering my wood pile had been pulled aside, and at least half my supply was gone. Probably more than half. Send me the video, I said. Already on its way. Peter, you need to call the police. This is theft. I ended the call and immediately dialed 911. While I waited for the police to arrive, I watched Tom's security footage on my phone. It showed Patricia and Frank clear as day, illuminated by Tom's motion-activated floodlight, loading wood from my yard into Frank's pickup truck. They made 3 trips, taking what looked like at least a quarter cord of wood. 2 Boulder police officers arrived within 20 minutes. I showed them the video and walked them out back to show them the theft scene. They took notes, asked questions, and confirmed they would follow up with Patricia and Frank. This is pretty straightforward, one officer said. Clear video evidence, obvious theft. We will go talk to them now. What happens then? Depends on whether they return the property and if you want to press charges. Given the video evidence, they would be smart to cooperate. After the police left, Sarah came downstairs in her robe. What is happening? I explained everything while she made coffee with shaking hands. She broke in and stole our firewood. Apparently helping the community justifies theft now. This is insane. An hour later, the police called. Patricia and Frank had admitted to taking the wood. They claimed it was not theft because they had left a check in my mailbox for fair market value. The check was for $200. Did you find a check? The officer asked. I went out to the mailbox and found it. $200, signed by Patricia Henderson, with firewood purchase written in the memo line. Leaving money does not make it not theft, the officer explained. They entered your property without permission and took items that belonged to you. That is burglary and theft regardless of whether they left payment. What are my options? You can press charges, which we recommend given the circumstances, or they can return the wood and you can handle this civilly. But either way, they broke the law. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to press charges just to see the look on Patricia's face, but another part of me wanted this whole mess to end. I want the wood returned, I said. All of it. And I want it in writing that the HOA will not retaliate against me in any way. And I want Patricia to resign from the HOA board. We can facilitate the first part, the officer said. The rest is between you and them, but given the situation, you have significant leverage. The wood was returned that afternoon. Frank Morrison showed up with his truck and 2 other board members, silently unloading every log they had taken. He would not make eye contact with me. After they finished, Patricia's car pulled up. She got out slowly, looking like she had aged 10 years overnight. I want to apologize, she said. What I did was wrong. I convinced myself it was justified, that the community need outweighed everything else, but I was wrong. You broke into my property and stole my firewood, I said. I know, and I am prepared to face the consequences. The board has asked for my resignation, and I am giving it. The police said if you decide to press charges, they will arrest me. I understand that. I looked at her standing there in my driveway, and I realized that pressing charges would not accomplish anything except making her life worse. She had already lost her position, her reputation in the community, and probably several friendships. I am not going to press charges, I said, but you are going to do something for me. What? You are going to write a formal letter to every homeowner in this community explaining what happened and why you are resigning. You are going to take full responsibility. And you are going to recommend that the board revise the covenant rules to allow reasonable outdoor storage structures like the wood rack you forced me to tear down. Patricia nodded. I can do that. And one more thing. You are going to help me rebuild my wood rack. What? You heard me. You and Frank and whoever else was involved in this mess. You are going to spend a Saturday helping me rebuild what you forced me to destroy. Consider it community service. To her credit, Patricia did not argue. The following Saturday, she showed up at 8 in the morning with Frank, Linda, and Gary. We spent 6 hours rebuilding the wood rack, this time even sturdier than before. Nobody talked much. Patricia worked hard, and I could tell she was genuinely trying to make amends. When we finished, she stood back and looked at the completed structure. It is a good rack, she said quietly. I was wrong to make you tear down the first one. Yes, you were. For what it is worth, I am sorry about all of it, I nodded. I did not forgive her exactly, but I appreciated the apology. Patricia's resignation letter went out that evening. It was surprisingly honest and straightforward, taking full responsibility for her actions and apologizing to the community. She explained that her desperation to solve the firewood crisis had led her to make terrible decisions, and she acknowledged that the crisis itself was partly the result of poor planning on her part. The letter created quite a stir. Some people were sympathetic, others were outraged. A few neighbors stopped by my house to apologize for not speaking up at the original HOA meeting. Tom Richards brought over a case of beer as a thank you for not pressing charges against Patricia, even though he said he would have understood if I had. The HOA held an emergency election to replace Patricia. A younger couple, the Johnsons, were elected as co-presidents. Their first act was to form a committee to review and revise the covenant rules, with a focus on making them more reasonable and less arbitrary. They asked me to join the committee, and somewhat to my surprise, I agreed. My firewood delivery from Fort Collins finally arrived in mid-January, and I made it through the rest of the winter without incident. I even sold a bit of wood to a few neighbors at cost, including Margaret Kowalski, who apologized stiffly for her attitude earlier in the season. Spring came, and with it, a new sense of normalcy in Evergreen Heights. The revised covenant rules were approved, allowing outdoor storage structures like wood racks with minimal restrictions. Several neighbors built their own racks, and a few even asked for my design recommendations. I never became close friends with Patricia Henderson. She moved out of the neighborhood that summer, selling her house to a family with 3 kids who immediately violated several of the old covenant rules in ways that everyone agreed made the neighborhood more alive and interesting. But before she left, Patricia stopped by one last time. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for not pressing charges, for giving me a chance to make things right." "People make mistakes," I said. "The question is what they do about them afterward. Still, you did not have to be that gracious." "Probably not, but holding grudges is exhausting." She smiled, a real smile this time. "Good luck with everything, Peter. You too, Patricia." I watched her drive away, thinking about how a simple firewood rack had nearly torn apart a community, and how the same community had managed to put itself back together, stronger and more sensible than before. The wood rack stood against my garage exactly where it belonged, stacked with split aspen and pine. By the time November rolled around again, half the neighborhood had similar racks, and nobody from the HOA said a word about them. The new co-presidents organized another bulk firewood program, but this time with multiple suppliers, proper contracts, and contingency planning. They asked if I wanted to participate, and I politely declined again. Some people just preferred to do things their own way, and that was okay now. The neighborhood had learned that diversity, even in something as simple as firewood procurement, made everyone more resilient. Winter came again, cold and harsh as before, but this time Evergreen Heights was ready. Smoke rose from chimneys throughout the neighborhood. Wood racks stood proudly in driveways and against garages, and nobody froze. More importantly, nobody broke into anyone else's property or acted like having a different approach to winter preparation was some kind of community betrayal. I stood in my driveway one evening in December, loading logs into my arms to carry inside, and Tom Richards walked by with his dog. "Looking good," he called out, gesturing to my wood rack. "Thanks. How is your supply holding up?" "Great. Built my own rack over the summer." "Turns out your design was pretty solid." "Happy to help." "You know," Tom said, "I was thinking about that whole mess last winter. It is funny how something as simple as firewood could cause so much trouble." "It was not really about the firewood," I said. "It was about control and rules and people forgetting that communities are supposed to help each other, not just enforce regulations." "Yeah," Tom agreed. "I am glad we figured that out, eventually." "Me too." He waved and continued his walk, and I carried my firewood inside. Sarah had the fireplace going already, and the house was warm and comfortable. I added my logs to the rack beside the hearth and sat down on the couch, feeling grateful for warmth, for reasonable neighbors, and for wood racks that were finally allowed to exist in peace. The whole experience had taught me something important about community life. Rules had their place, certainly. But when rules became more important than the people they were meant to serve, when enforcement became about power rather than actually improving life for residents, that was when problems started. Patricia had learned that lesson the hard way, and so had the rest of us. The fire crackled and popped, burning the wood I had personally selected, properly stored and carefully managed throughout the season. My wood rack stood outside in the cold, doing exactly what it was designed to do, keeping firewood dry and ready for use. Such a simple thing, really. But then again, the best solutions usually were simple. It just took some people longer than others to figure that out. As I sat there watching the flames, I thought about how close everything had come to going much worse. If I had pressed charges, Patricia might have ended up with a criminal record. If she had not been willing to make amends, the neighborhood might have split into hostile factions. If the new board had not been willing to revise the rules, the same problems could have repeated year after year. But none of those things happened. Instead, people talked, apologized, and worked together to find better solutions. It was not perfect, and it certainly had not been pleasant getting there, but it worked. The community was stronger for having gone through the struggle, and everyone had learned something valuable about cooperation, planning, and the importance of letting people make their own reasonable choices. The next morning, I woke to another email from the HOA, but this time it was just a routine notice about snow removal schedules. No drama, no demands, no threats of fines. Just useful information delivered in a straightforward manner. It was remarkable how much better everything worked when the people in charge focused on actual problems instead of creating new ones. I deleted the email and got ready for work, glancing out the window at my wood rack as I drank my coffee. It was still there, still full, still completely unremarkable, which was exactly how it should be. Some things in life were worth fighting for, and apparently the right to stack firewood in your own yard was one of them. Later that week, I ran into Frank Morrison at the grocery store. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me, which I understood. "Peter," he said, "how are you?" "Good, you?" "All right." He hesitated. "Listen, I never properly apologized for my part in the whole wood theft thing. That was completely out of line, and I am sorry." "I appreciate that, Frank." Patricia kind of steamrolled me into it. Not that it is an excuse. I should have said no. Probably. But it worked out okay in the end. "Yeah," he looked relieved. "The new board is doing a good job. Less drama, more practical stuff. That is all anyone wanted." Frank nodded and pushed his cart away, and I finished my shopping thinking about how people often got caught up in situations they never intended. Frank had not been a bad guy. He had just gone along with Patricia's increasingly desperate plans, without stopping to think about whether they were right. It was a good reminder to stay aware of my own decisions, and not let group thinking override personal judgment. February brought a brief warm spell, temperatures climbing into the 50s for a few days before dropping again. I used the break to reorganize my wood supply, moving the driest pieces to the front of the rack for easier access. A few neighbors stopped by while I worked, and we chatted about winter preparations for the next year, about whether to order wood in summer when prices were lower, about different types of wood and their burning characteristics. These were the kinds of conversations that made neighborhood life worthwhile, people sharing information and experiences without judgment or hidden agendas. This was what Patricia's community firewood program could have been if she had not tried to force everyone into it, and then punished those who opted out. March arrived with more snow, then April with rain. The wood rack had proven itself through a full winter cycle, standing up to snow loads, wind, and temperature swings without any issues. The wood stored inside stayed dry and ready to burn, which was literally the entire point of having the rack in the first place. When May finally brought consistent warm weather, I still had about a quarter cord of wood left. I covered it with a tarp and left it for next season, knowing it would be perfectly seasoned by the time cold weather returned. Several neighbors had asked throughout the winter if they could buy wood from me, but I had directed them to Ron up in Nederland instead. He had appreciated the referrals, and several of my neighbors had become regular customers of his. The HOA held its annual meeting in June, outdoors this time in the community park. The Johnsons presented their accomplishments from the past 6 months: revised covenants, better financial planning, improved communication with residents. There was a vote on the new covenant language, which passed with overwhelming support. Under the new rules, outdoor storage structures up to a certain size were allowed without pre-approval as long as they met basic standards for materials and maintenance. Wood racks specifically were called out as permitted structures, along with tool sheds, small greenhouses, and other practical items. The old Architectural Review Committee was restructured to focus on major modifications, rather than micromanaging every minor change. It was everything I had hoped for when I first built my wood rack, and it had only taken a major crisis and near criminal behavior to get there. Progress was messy sometimes. Summer passed peacefully. I spent weekends hiking in the mountains, working in my small garden, and occasionally helping neighbors with various projects. The sense of community that had been strained to the breaking point during the winter had largely recovered, though people were more cautious now about going along with HOA initiatives without asking questions. In August, I ordered a full cord of wood from Ron, delivered and stacked by September 1st. This time, nobody said anything about my wood rack, and I noticed several more had appeared throughout the neighborhood. Some were simple like mine, others were more elaborate with decorative elements. All of them were full of split wood, ready for winter. The first frost came in October, right on schedule. I lit my first fire of the season on a chilly evening, watching the flames catch and spread through the carefully stacked logs. Sarah joined me on the couch with hot chocolate, and we sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn. "You know," she said eventually, "I am glad you did not just tear down the wood rack when Patricia first told you to. Even though it caused all that trouble, especially because of that. Sometimes trouble is worth it if it leads to better outcomes. Philosophical tonight, are we?" she smiled, just appreciating a warm fire and the fact that we do not have to worry about the HOA showing up to fine us for having firewood. Fair enough. The fire crackled, the house was warm, and outside my wood rack stood solid and full, completely unremarkable and perfectly functional. Somewhere in Colorado, Patricia Henderson was presumably getting settled into whatever life came after her time as HOA president. I hoped she was doing well, genuinely. People deserved second chances, and she had owned her mistakes in a way that many people never managed to do. Winter came, and this time, it was mild compared to the previous year. Temperatures stayed mostly in the 20s and 30s, with only a few weeks of truly bitter cold. My wood supply lasted easily, even with the fireplace running most evenings. I never ran low, never worried about running out, never had to scramble to find emergency supplies. By the time spring returned, I had developed a comfortable routine. Order wood in summer, stack it in the rack by early fall, burn it throughout winter, and start the cycle again. Simple, practical, and completely drama-free, just as it should have been from the beginning. The second annual meeting under the new board was even more boring than the first, which everyone agreed was a good thing. Budgets were approved, maintenance schedules were discussed, and the whole thing wrapped up in less than an hour. No controversies, no heated debates, no surprise revelations about theft or misconduct. As I walked back to my house after the meeting, I passed my wood rack and stopped to look at it for a moment. Such a simple structure, just 2x4s and wood slats holding split logs. But it represented something larger now, a reminder that standing up for reasonable positions could create positive change, even when it seemed easier to just comply with unreasonable demands. I never regretted building that wood rack, not even during the worst of the conflict with Patricia. It had been the right thing to do, and the community was better off for the upheaval it had caused. Sometimes the only way to fix broken systems was to refuse to work within them, to insist on better solutions even when it created temporary chaos. The wood rack stood there against my garage, full of seasoned wood ready for the next winter, a permanent fixture of my property that nobody questioned anymore. And somewhere in the revised HOA covenants was language that protected not just my right to have it, but the right of every homeowner to make similar reasonable choices about their own property. That was worth fighting for. That was worth all the meetings and arguments and uncomfortable confrontations. Because at the end of the day, communities worked best when people could be individuals within them, when rules served residents instead of controlling them, and when simple practical solutions like wood racks were allowed to exist without bureaucratic interference. I went inside, added another log to the evening fire, and settled in for a quiet night at home. Outside, my wood rack stood in the gathering dusk, doing exactly what it was designed to do. Nothing more, nothing less, just exactly enough.